and then using the whole length of the scissors, cut it to the end. Now I'm going to open it up fully and cut it all the way to the end, like that. Now if I want to cut a curve, you need to position the paper so that it's easier to turn it. And now I'm going to turn the paper as I'm cutting using the full length of the scissors. Now this is very tricky because it comes to a little point and I can't get the scissors in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the other side, turning it all the way as I'm cutting. And then I'm going to go back on the shape from a different angle. As you can see, cutting back into the shape, approach it from a different angle, holding it really carefully. Now if you need to hold it down onto the board to get less wobble, then do that. So now I'm going to just remove that little bit. There we go. So I can cut right into the corner, but you need to approach it from a different angle or a different side if you're going to do that. So now I'm going to cut around the rest of the shape. So this is a very delicate shape. So I'm going to open the scissors fully. And then as I'm cutting, slowly turn the paper. Stop. Now it's quite tricky, that corner. So I'm going to cut across and then approach it from the other angle. So I'm just going to open the scissors fully, cutting slowly, holding the paper steady, and then turning the paper and the scissors as I'm cutting. So you might want to slow down so that you don't cut over the part that you want to keep. There we go. And you can see I've cut out that shape. So if you've missed a few little bits, I've now got the space to go over it if I need to. So I'm just going to do that with a slightly larger shape. So I'm cutting in again, open the scissors fully, cut around and move the paper as you're cutting. Now if you want to cut the inside shape and you haven't got a knife, the best thing to do is make a little hole with the scissors so that you can get your scissors into the shape and cut around really carefully inside the shape like this. And if you can't get into the corner, approach it from a different side. So maybe I need to put my scissors in at this angle and then cut down. And then you can see, oh, I don't want to pull that in case it rips, that I've cut out the full shape. Now there's some more bits that I have left, so I can just turn the paper around, approach it from a different angle, and then just cut around the bits that I've left really carefully. I might cut that out later once I've cut the whole shape out, but that's how you cut a piece out and leaving a hole in the middle with just scissors. This is a demonstration on how to use a cutting knife. So you need to get a cutting mat to put your piece of paper on, and a cutting knife, a craft knife. Now you'll need to notice that this craft knife has a ratchet system that enables you to push the knife out. Do not extend the knife more than 2 segments on the blade, because this knife is designed to break the segments when it becomes blunt, and if you extend it too far, there's a chance that there'll be too much pressure on the knife and the segments will break off and could go somewhere that you don't want it to, like in your face. So in order to keep the knife stable and in one place, to lock it, you need to pull this clip out so that it's separated. That stops the blade from going back into the knife. So this, click it in, you can move it when it's together, pull it apart, and it locks the blade. Now you need to be using a metal ruler. It's better to use a metal ruler, although you can use a plastic ruler to cut straight edges. So I'm just going to place the metal ruler along the straight edge that I'd like to cut carefully. Now I'm going to hold the knife. There's various ways that you can hold the knife to make sure it's steady. One way is to hold it so that this end part is in the palm of your hand and that you can press down like this, straight. Keep the blade at 90 degrees to the cutting mat. Don't have it at an angle because it will rip and tear the paper. So keep the blade at 90 degrees, and you also need to have it so that the end of the blade, which has got an angle on it, is touching the paper like this. So I'm going to keep it at 90 degrees to the paper. I'm going to press the blade up against the ruler carefully, and cutting straight down, I'm going to, pulling it against the ruler, try to cut a straight edge. There we go, like that, and stop. Now in order to cut a curved edge, you might need to turn your cutting mat at an angle so that it's better to cut and the curve as you're pulling it into your body. You need to always cut away from your hands, but to cut a curve you pull the knife and turn it carefully at an angle away from your hands into your body. If you want to move the mat around to make the angle more convenient and easy to cut, you can then just move the mat to rotate it around so that you, or the paper, or just move the paper around so that you can cut it. Now I can't see where to stop, so you might just need to have an idea or make an extra mark on the paper so that you can see where to stop. Now in order to cut this curved shape, I need to cut freehand. I'm just going to put the cutting mat back. There we go. And just move the paper. I need to cut freehand with the knife, so I'm going to be cutting away from my hands, and I'm going to hold the knife, pressing down like this onto the paper, and move my elbow and whole hand slowly so that it cuts around the curve. Now at this point it gets really difficult. My hand is at an awkward position, so I'm now going to move the paper so that everything is straight and it's better angle for cutting. So I'm now going to cut carefully and carry on cutting, pressing at a sort of medium to heavy pressure, and you just stop and turn the paper again. And if I want to carry this on, I'll turn it at the most convenient angle to cut. Now sometimes when you're cutting small shapes you might find it easier to hold it a bit more like a pen, but it can make it quite awkward for you to cut. It doesn't really matter how you hold it, but as long as it's steady. Now holding it like this, more like a pen, you might not get as much pressure onto the blade, but you might find that's okay. But whatever keeps it from moving around, just practice to see whether you prefer to hold it like this or like this, to see which is the better way of holding it. Now if you find that your blade is blunt, we'll need to break off one of these segments, and this knife is designed to do that. You pull the end out and it has a little slot in the end which you put over the blade, and then you twist and break it, but mine doesn't need to be broken off, and you should only do that and let your teacher do that. You should not do that on your own. So if you're using these at school, tell your teacher and let your teacher do that so they can dispose of this sharp blade somewhere else. If you don't cut all the way through, sometimes it's better not to pull and rip the paper. You just have to go over it again really carefully, just to make sure you've caught the paper, cut the paper in the corners to finish cutting the design. So don't pull the paper if you haven't quite cut all the way through on all of the sides. Making a letter collage. Print out a minimum of 2 capital letters. Make sure the letters have an interesting shape and variety of thicknesses. The same letter can be used to make repeat patterns. Experiment with the different positions of how it can look. Line up the parts so that they connect. Try other types of font that might contrast with the other. Look to see how straight edges could contrast with round ones. When you've made your final selection, cut it out. Turn the paper when cutting curves. Use the end of the scissors, the pointed end, to cut out small shapes. Pinch and cut a hole to cut out the centre part of the shape. Cut your letter into 2 or 3 pieces. Experiment with the positioning and arranging the shapes. Use blue tack to hold the shapes in place. Have only a tiny few pieces, as you might need to move the shapes later on. Press down lightly so it can be moved if necessary. Line up and connect the shapes. Experiment with alternative positions. Place one piece at a time. Move on to the next shape when you're happy with it. Try not to cut the letters into lots of small pieces. Keep some shapes large and dramatic. This contrasts with the smaller, delicate shapes. Have some parts overlapping. Look at the overall design when adding the final pieces. The final composition needs to have a sense of balance. Use Pritt stick to glue in place. The blue tack does not need to be removed. if you've used small amounts so that there aren't any big lumps under the letters. Look at the design from different angles.